morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters with me, Dr Audrey Tang. As you can see, our setup is slightly different today, and that's because we've got a very special show for you. Today, we wanted to reflect on a very important topic, which is suicide prevention. And whilst we do have guests who can come in and talk about this issue, our charity that we support, Click Arts Foundation, recently ran an event to raise awareness about suicide prevention. And it's part of a lot of the work they do. They run wellbeing events in order to raise awareness of a lot of key mental health issues. So what we're going to be showing you today are extracts from that production, and you will hear some of the best speakers, some people sharing their lived experiences, and you'll also see a performance relating to all of those topics surrounding our mental health, which can take us down some dark pathways. So all the show notes will include areas that you can go for help. So please, if you're affected by anything that you see in today's show, please look at the show notes. They will signpost you in the place where you can get support. But the first person we're going to hear from is somebody who has been on our show before. It's Arun Shergill. You may remember him. He's our entrepreneur who co-founded Raw Gymwear. And in the suicide prevention event, he shared his experience with mental health. So let's go over to the Place Theatre in Bedford and listen to his story.
I wanted to take you through my journey. So as I mentioned, I'm 25 years old. Born and bred in Milton Keynes, and I hate to use the word suffered. I hate to use the word issues. Mental health should not be something negative, but I have suffered with my mental health for about the last decade or so. The timeline's a bit messy, it's probably a little bit longer. But as I said, I don't like to use the word suffered. It's really helped grow me. I've really grown and matured with these struggles that I've faced. You know, I've heard a lyric that says, why run from the struggle that made you? And at the end of the day, that's true. That's not to say be depressed all the time, that's just to say accept that it has helped you and go from there. So I started therapy. I was having CBT during my first year of university, and I hated it. And I used to wake up and just resent the fact that I had to go. And then one day, because I like to sleep a lot, my brother came in to wake me up. And I was mid-dream that he was a demon, and I opened my eyes and there he was, and I screamed. So that was fun. But yeah, I had CBT through sort of the summer after first year of university and through second year of uni. It wouldn't have been possible without my parents. It's actually a really taboo subject in our community. Coming from an ethnic minority, you know, my background, I'm obviously a Sikh, well not obviously, but pretty obvious. I'm religious in case you didn't know. But you know, it's a really taboo thing in our community and people don't talk about it enough. So when I eventually opened up to my parents after a breakdown on the day that we landed in Sicily, which was an unbelievable start to our family holiday on my 50th birthday, they really got me the help and support that I needed. And as I said, I first went to CBT and then was doing alright, and just before lockdown I started ACT, the lesser known acceptance commitment therapy. And I was working on social anxiety. I had crippling social anxiety to the point where I couldn't talk to people. People would come up to me and I would freeze. So I decided to combat that, and I was working with a therapist. I'd had one session, and when we were talking about, you know, going out and about and going for a walk around the lake and things like that, and being able to implement these strategies, you know, outdoors. And then lockdown hit, so couldn't go outdoors. So that was sort of 8 weeks of, well, we hope the country opens up soon so you can actually go and use these techniques, but it didn't quite work. I then started medication. I started on sertraline, got pushed up to the max dose, and still really struggled mentally. And then I switched to fluoxetine, got pushed up to the max dose, and started to do quite well. And then back end of last year, I relapsed quite badly, and now I'm on quetiapine as well as the fluoxetine, which is an antipsychotic. This year, I'm about 3 to 4 months in reducing my fluoxetine, and it's going well. Yeah, so that brings us to today. And as I said, going through the process of being tested for ADHD. During school times, I felt like I didn't hit my potential. I was great at maths, obviously, and I was in gifted and talented in secondary school. I used to come in early and do maths, and it wasn't really fun, but it was nice to be recognised, and I was sort of touted as a straight A-star student, and didn't quite hit those heights, and it's something that's kind of haunted me since. But there's kind of a reason now, and as much as it is frustrating, I'm glad to finally have some explanation for some of my behaviour. But it's important to be responsible as well, and really put in the work and really understand our own behaviours and being able to become better people. For me, a really prominent symptom is anger. Get angry very quickly, and it's a really difficult one to try and combat, really, because when you're in the house and you're getting angry and you can't really do anything, you kind of have to bottle it up. So I started to do kickboxing and boxing through actually a men's mental health support group that I go to called the Man Cave. They are unbelievable. They have some in Bedford, they have in Milton Keynes and Northampton as well, Aylesbury and Bicester, I believe, as well. The connections and the support that I have from that place is second to none. It really is life-changing. And through that, we started kickboxing and boxing, and I want to get fitter as well. So that's another one of the reasons that I joined. But I think it's important to talk about mental health in sort of ethnic communities. Again, as I mentioned, it's a very taboo subject. There was a family friend of mine from our community who took his life in 2016, and I wasn't that close to him. We used to play football together. It was my dad who used to play, and the boys younger than him, and then it was me, who were about 10 years younger than them, and I was about 14 when I first started playing with them. So I wasn't that close with him, but it really got me. I never understood why, and I had never felt that way before, and I couldn't process it. And I always felt guilty because I was with him a few weeks before, and he was happy. He was smiling and laughing and joking, and his energy, it was all really good. And then a couple of weeks later, he's gone. And to this day, I haven't still quite processed it, and it's again, it's hard, and I think it's something that we need to talk about more in our community. So that's one of the things that I'm really trying to do, is get people talking. I think I forgot your name. I'm really sorry. Andy, sorry. You mentioned it earlier in the closing sort of sentences of your speech when you mentioned asking people, are they okay? Are you sure you're okay? Are you really? And that's really important.
Something that I have taken from when Arun's spoken in the past is how exhausting some of those negative automatic thoughts can be. And I think unless you've been in that position, it's really difficult to understand. So all I'm saying, if you're trying to support someone, if you're trying to understand what someone might be going through when they're having depressive thoughts and anxieties, is the amount of effort it takes to quieten down their mind can be so much that it's really difficult for them to be able to join in to something in the way that perhaps you would hope they were able to. So it's time to be a little bit patient, as well as perhaps even learn a little bit more around the topic. And to help us with this topic were our keynote speakers, Andy Willis and Lisa Pearson from the Northamptonshire Foundation Trust Suicide Prevention Team.
I do work for the NHS. I would love to stand here and say I had all the answers to this issue that we have worldwide around suicide prevention. I don't. I'd very much like to. I might not have a job after it, but I would be very pleased to. I've been working for the Trust in the NHS for about 2 years in suicide prevention. My background was working in something called Talking Therapies, which was a therapy service, which I did for many years. I listened very much and have loved, I'm so thankful to be here, Audrey. Thank you so much for asking us. And to be my authentic self, I thought I can't actually say that without giving you a bit of background to that. So I also have a mental health diagnosis myself, and was diagnosed when I was 22 with bipolar disorder. So I am a survivor of suicide attempts as well. So when I talk about this experience, we're very passionate about the area we work in. We want to get the messaging out and join these things and talk about this. Is the importance of it is quite personal as well. And I thought I couldn't really stand up here, in all honesty, and not say that as well. So for the first thing, we've talked a lot about statistics. People have brought them in today. I can't see anybody because of these lights, but can everybody stand up for me? Come on, because if anybody, this is well past my bedtime. So, and if you can look around, I can't see you, but if you can look around the room at each other and just look at how unique and different you all are. Okay. So research says in the UK, 1 in 5 people experience suicidal thoughts in their lifetime. So as you're looking around this room, 1 in 5. Okay. And research says that 1 in 15 people will make an attempt on their life in their lifetime. 1 in 15. So this is an everybody issue. Doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, your colour, your creed, your ethnicity, what your social standing is. This is an everybody problem, and this is why we need to talk about it. You can sit down. I think one of the things I really learnt when I took this job, and lots of people were really scared of the word suicide, and I've seen lots of people react really emotionally and obviously really engaged in what they're talking about today. So again, thinking about psychological safety, making sure that you're safe after you leave here today is really important. And that's not just because you might feel that way yourself, but actually thinking and talking about this is a hard subject. But somebody said to me, and I'll never forget it, when I took this job, they said, if you're into Harry Potter, they said, suicide is a word like Voldemort. When we say it, people think it's got power. And you know what? The only power with the word suicide is using it. And that's why we need to have it in our narrative. And that's why the theme for World Suicide Prevention Day, Change the Narrative, is so powerful. It's something that me and Andy are really keen to get the messaging out. Let's talk about this. Let's make this an everyday conversation. Just think about how much power we have if we were asking people and we're talking about how they are. It really changes the perspective of what it is. It's not something to be afraid of. It's something to get out there in the open. Shining that light on it, having those conversations can make an absolute difference. So for all the stuff we've talked about today, one of the key messages I've heard is hope. Is actually we can make a difference, whether that's to our friends, our families, our colleagues, or to ourselves. Actually, by bringing this into the light, we can make a difference and change the narrative. And I think that's probably what our message is very much today.
I think it's such a unique challenge because just as you've all got your own emotions, what's happening in your life, suicide and suicide prevention has to come from a personalised approach. That's all I would say. You'll hear some of my lived experience now, but that's just me. There are so many people, today has been an example, but in this topic, all perspectives have to be heard, including those who support. I mean, it's such a challenging topic. So I think, for context, I've had 6 episodes of severe mental illness. When I shake this out, 2/3 of people who end their life by suicide are not under secondary mental health care. You don't have to have this overwhelming layer of severe mental illness to be vulnerable. It's a very, very important message, I would say. But all I can give is my lived experience. So the 6 episodes, my joint diagnosis is when I'm unwell, it's recurrent depression, episodes of recurrent depression, emotional unstable personality disorder. And of the five of the 6 episodes, there will be an overwhelming presence, even medicated or otherwise, of psychosis, which presents risk, huge crushing levels of anxiety. All of those welter of emotions and symptoms just associated with those are sufficient. It's difficult to endure. If you ever hear anyone saying, just want it to stop, I just want to get away from this, I just want to go to sleep, that is often, in my lived experience, an early sign before even having a thought of dying by suicide. And sometimes you can't endure it. And that's without the perception that you can't solve problems, things that are happening in people's lives. It's normally a combination of things. It can be 1 or 2 really significant things. Of those 6 episodes, everyone had suicidal thinking in them. I've made 7 attempts to die by suicide. The first 2 when I was 27 in an inpatient setting, so many decades ago. Where there was hope, when I was a changed person, I kept everything in. I was terrified because I had no insight into the lowering of the depression. I had no insight when the psychosis started to take shape around, for me, a religious dimension. It was terrifying. I thought I was incurable. I had a perception if I went into a psychiatric ward in those days, way back when St Christmas was called the asylum, I had a perception I'd be locked away forever. All of these things, but I wasn't sharing the fact I was having suicidal thoughts. But I changed after that, and I reached out. I sort of found had a lot of insight. So the next 3 episodes, my safety plan, I was able to counter those thoughts. But my episodes would be about 6 months, and then I would have that hope I would start to recover. The last one was very, very different. It was triggered in September 2011, and I was under secondary mental health care, and there were long periods of daily dealing with suicidal thoughts and loss of hope completely. And that was 6.5 years. It was very different. And there were a combination of things. When your marriage goes, you get separated from your children. It wasn't appropriate for me to be in the presence of the children, not because I was a danger to them, they would have been too shocked. I was isolated, then I lost my job. When things in a long period of unfolding, when you're struggling, every aspect of your life starts to fall apart. And I guess approaching that April of 2012, and there's a lot of myths in suicide prevention work in this topic, I was actually articulating that I was beginning to lose control. I was medicated up with psychosis, but I was talking about having suicidal thoughts. I need to get somewhere. I received a late diagnosis for personality disorder, which we're talking quite a few years ago. A lot of stigma. One of the myths is if somebody's talking about it, that somehow they're not at risk. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. There's a perception sometimes when people are reaching out and talking about it, they're, to quote, attention seeking. No, they're not. They're help seeking. And that's another myth. All I needed if I took it back to that inpatient setting, risk is incredibly dynamic. I was having those thoughts, I was into the inpatient setting, and within 16 hours I'd made an attempt on my life in the inpatient setting that had I been in a community and isolated, I would have died. Nobody asked me what was causing my distress. Nobody put the question, how are you feeling? We said, are you okay? Are you really okay? Really important. Never be afraid to ask, how safe do you feel from yourself? I'm going to ask you this because it's so important to, are you having thoughts of dying? Are you having suicidal thoughts? Use the words. They could have been interruptions that could have made a big difference. The second attempt I made in the inpatient setting, this is where the risk is different, because when I woke up, my first thought was, I couldn't even get that right. And I was planning over 3 weeks, but I wasn't consistently in that place. You can always interrupt, you can always take somebody out of that place where the planning is moving towards volition and action, but nobody had those conversations. So I guess the attempts that I made, around 4 attempts in the April of 2012, and then things unfolded, and I guess another factor that came in was the death of my mum. She was looking after me, the guilt, all of those things, that self-hatred, you're living with it, and that was the 7th, and hopefully the last attempt. That was around February of 2013. But where there's hope, there's another myth that you always have suicidal thoughts. I haven't had a suicidal thought since 2016. And I think the one thing, we're talking about the importance of helping others by normalising the conversation, by asking the question. And somebody, I can't remember who it was, really important, active listening. Let the person talk. Just let them talk, because there is a real myth that if you start using the word suicide, somehow those thoughts are going to suddenly start appearing in someone's head. And that's rubbish. I've had the privilege of talking to lots of people. That's not the case. The thoughts are there or they're not. They don't suddenly appear because someone's asking. In fact, when somebody's asking, I might have had trouble articulating it, but it represented that they cared, particularly if they were listening. I'm not trying to put things right. Realistic hope. The other myth is if you're having suicidal thoughts, if somebody is asking you about what's brought you to that place, you're suddenly going to go into a planning stage. It's not the case. What you want is someone to be sitting alongside, giving some realistic hope, and putting you into the place of those that can help you, and giving that hope, because there is a different way. I think what I would say, and I'm aware of the time, what I mean by an interruption, and this could be when that person is in that place of, we call it volitional action, and it's a very small time frame. Even the most determined planning, when you're in deceit, when you are not communicating, when you can't be reached easily, you can still be interrupted. And the example I'll give, I was in a rented accommodation and I had the means and the thoughts were there, that self-justification, where you're a burden, your children are going to be better off without you. The mind takes you into a complete place of self-justification and a solution. Somebody referenced earlier where they became, I think it was one of the people that spoke about their friend who seemed smiling. I can recognise that on two of the attempts. One was masking, but one was a genuine feeling of a disordered thinking solution. And the example I'll give, I was in that place in the rented accommodation, and literally about to, and the door knocked, and it was the daughter, and all she was doing, she wanted a mirror so she could do her hair, go downtown to meet her mates. And in that moment, I got rid of the means. I was still incredibly distressed. I had trouble talking with her. I put the mask on, and when she left, I wasn't out of the place. I was thinking, how can I get the means back? But I was not in the place where I would suddenly perhaps leave the house and seek another means. On all of 6 of the 7 occasions, even the one where I was gripped in psychosis, where the punishing thoughts were such, this is with the inpatient setting, I could describe it, but it was extraordinary. And the last thought, even in that moment, there was a patient across there. If someone had walked in and spoken to me, it would have been the interruption. In that moment, my last thought, I don't remember all of it, I've got an idea. I can reflect on many, but my last punishing thought linked to the psychosis was, this is God's test. He's asking you to end your life and you'll go to heaven and not hell. Because I was racked with this idea of irrational guilt, and it's hard to explain. That could have been interrupted. And that was true of every one of the attempts, of the different means, the different moments. They're all unique. They're all very individual. This is the personalised nature of the challenge. And on the 7th attempt, I reached out. I made the phone call that made the difference, that effectively helped me. But it's the work that everyone can do, talking about it, normalising it, asking the question, being supportive in you all have been today together. That's what makes the difference in terms of suicide prevention.
So I suppose our pledge to you this evening is to keep changing the narrative. So you've heard lots of information today, you might have experience of it, we know how many people it impacts on. We don't know all your experiences, and I think me and I talk a lot about in training is that whoever we're training, we've just trained 200 police training core staff. Doesn't matter who we train, where they are in life, what their qualification is, you do not need to be an ologist to make a difference. So you can ask this question and you can make a difference and interrupt. and that doesn't mean that you need to solve the problem. So I think one of the things we really fear is that actually if we ask the question and somebody says, yes, I do feel like this, that we're there to solve the problem. And I think Andy would agree that the amount of people we talk to who've been in that situation say they just want you to listen. When you ask, it shows care, and that's the most important thing you can do, is that active listening. So we've got a bit of a pledge for you. So there's 2 things we'd like you to think about for the rest of the week, is about changing the narrative. So continue to have these conversations. Continue to use the word suicide. Talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, talk to your family. Is there someone you're sitting there thinking about, which I pretty much guarantee you probably are, who perhaps has gone through a relationship breakup, has lost a job, or you just haven't heard from for a while? Check in, check they're okay. That could be your pledge for what you can do for change the narrative. The other thing is, if you are wanting more information on this topic and you want a bit more support, then we've got time from a training perspective. The Zero Suicide Alliance training is something I plead you all to do. It's 20 minutes training, it's online, it's free, it's research based, it's really easy to do and access. There's lots of different genres you can do. There's students, veterans, you can choose different scenarios, but what it will do is just upskill you. Education is key, giving you a bit of empowering you to be able to ask the question. So, you know, go out and find it, because it is free and if you're able to do it. So I suppose our messaging is very much is that thank you for being here, because that shows that you're wanting to talk about this subject and change the narrative. Take that out into your community, because this affects everybody. You can make a massive difference. But also, if you're feeling that you're in that place right now, or actually you're thinking, do you know what, actually I do need to seek some help, even if you're at the beginning of that journey, talking is key. And I know that's really difficult, depending what background you've got and how you feel about it, but actually there is help out there, and you can get support, and that doesn't always have to be through services. That can be from your mate, that can be from your family, you know, supportive others. So don't be afraid to tell people, because actually people really want to hear, because we want you to be here. And as Andy always does, your key line, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, there's a lot of talk about the safety plan. Thankfully, there will be a number, well, hopefully quite a few people who've never had a suicide before. My safety plan for you will be, if a thought comes in, don't feel ashamed at all. No. Immediately talk to a trusted person. Share that immediately. Don't keep it to yourself. I mean, that's very, it's an obvious thing to say, but it's not always obvious when it happens to you, or when you're confused, or whatever things are. But I'll just finish on this, really, to reinforce the message. The other day, I took my grandson, Freddie, fishing. It was his first fishing thing. And the daughter, Jess, took the photo, and there was myself, I'll get sitting on a fishing basket, Freddie, and my son Henry, and it just occurred to me while I was looking at this up on the WhatsApp, I thought none of those 3 in the picture would be here if I died when I was 27. And equally, I thought, hang on, the photograph wouldn't have been taken. So the ripples, you don't think like that, of course. There isn't genuinely a week goes by where I don't thank goodness that I'm alive. And I mean that, not in any sort of trite way. But genuinely, there's always a reflection, always a reflection. And I think that really comes down to the one moment I didn't create my own interruption. On the first of those attempts, around 2012, April, I sent a text to my sister, who was the one person still I was in contact with, and it was in the past tense. I said, always remember that I loved you. And she came. I don't know what prompted her. And the means I was using, we are talking 30 seconds. So this topic is so important. And whatever the source of the grief that takes the person to that place, with time, problems can be resolved. Support can come in. Things can change. And in my case, it's a line that I use, but I genuinely mean it. You can't recover, whatever that recovery looks like, that change that is different, you can't do that if you're dead. It is such an important topic, and all of you already today have shown your qualities. Get that message out there and continue on this really challenging topic. It's so important.
Thank you for this.
Something I took from that, and it's something that I spoke to a lot of people about actually after the event, was how Andy talked about interruptions. And interruptions of negative thinking can be absolutely anything. It's not even an interruption in any form of clinical kind of conversation. It's not interrupting someone by saying, are you having suicidal thoughts? It's an interruption which can be a phone call to check in, a text, a WhatsApp, just to say hi. And I think that really reminds us of the importance of checking in on people, because that interruption, whatever that is, even if it's just a little emoji popping up on your phone, can be enough to interrupt somebody's thinking. So please, please do bear that in mind. And as I said, all of the show notes are attached. So please go and look at the comments, look at the blurb attached to this show, and you will find links which are helpful to use. We now go on to something slightly different, and this is from another event run by Click Arts Foundation, and this was held at the St Crispin's Community Centre. This particular event focused on women and women's health, especially women who were over a certain age, shall we say. Because one of the key issues there is loneliness. And I know this affects men as well, but in this particular case, one of Click's trustees, Patsy Wright, she's also a newsreader for this show, performed a piece from Notes on a Scandal. And this piece was particularly moving because it really brings out what can happen when you're surrounded by many people, but you're just not feeling any connection. So let's hand over to Patsy at the St Crispin's Community Centre.
Being alone isn't the most awful thing in the world. You visit your museums and cultivate your interests and think to yourself how lucky you are not to be one of those Sudanese children with flies beating their mouths. You make out to-do lists, reorganise linen cupboards, learn 2 sonnets. You dole out treats for yourself, slices of ice cream cake, concerts with more Hall, and then every once in a while you wake up and stare out the window at another bloody daybreak and think to yourself, I can't do this anymore. I cannot pull myself together and face the next 15 hours of wakefulness, fending off the fact of my own misery. People like sheep, I think they know what it is to be lonely. They cast their minds back to the time they broke up with their boyfriend in 1975 and had to endure a whole month on their own before meeting someone new. Or the week in the Bavarian steel town, visiting their greasy-haired German pen pal and realising her handwriting was the best thing about her. But about the drip of the long hall, no ending sight, solitude. They know nothing. They don't know what it is to construct an entire weekend around a trip to the laundrette, or to sit in a darkened flat on Halloween night, because you can't face exposing your bleak evening to a horde of rowdy trick-or-treaters, or when the librarian smiles sweetly at you, pitying you, and says, "My, you're a quick reader," when you return 7 books read from cover to cover a week after you've taken them out. They don't know what it is to be so chronically untouched brush, the bus conductor's hand on your shoulder sends a jolt of longing straight to your groin. I have sat on park benches and schoolroom chairs and tubes and felt the great store of objectless, unused love sitting in my belly like a stone until I thought I would fall flailing to the ground and cry out about such things. Sheba and her like have no clue.
I thought I'd take Business Boost here today because, as I say, this has been a very unusual show, and I'm grateful to all of our speakers, all of our professionals who've come on to offer such important insights and signpost you to all the places that can support you. And as I say, please look at the show notes if you need extra support. In Business Boost, I wanted to pick up on our last speaker and talk about the topic of loneliness, because loneliness and solitude are two different things. When it comes to loneliness, it can be you can feel lonely in a crowded room. Whereas when it comes to solitude, you can be really comfortable with your own company, and that's okay. And actually, if you're enjoying solitude, as many people do, one of the worst things that can happen is someone coming in going, "Are you all right? Do you want some company?" And you're just thinking, "Oh no, I don't, but I don't want to be rude." So let's have a look at loneliness in particular. You can have two types of loneliness. You can have social loneliness, you can have emotional loneliness. Social loneliness is the more conventional, where you are missing being out with people. But when I say people, that doesn't mean just going out anywhere with anyone. It's probably missing people who you have some kind of meeting of the minds with, people who get you, people with whom you can have fun and you can be yourself. That is where social loneliness can come in. And I will give you some tips to combat that one. Emotional loneliness is when you are missing one particular person or one particular experience. And that is where you have that emotional connection to someone. And it may well be that you need to have time to process why you're missing them. Maybe they'll be coming back. Maybe you have to process grief. And that is not something that can happen very, very quickly. And there you have to give yourself time. And that is okay. And you can ask for time as well. And one of the things I would suggest is, please don't pretend everything's okay for the sake of everybody else. Good friends will understand. So that's something just to remember. When it comes to combating social loneliness, there are a few things that you can do. And the workplace is not actually a bad place to make a start. When it comes to having conversations, it might be having conversations that aren't necessarily overly personal, but don't just stick to the weather and something that's so conventional to talk about. So ask people about their holidays or maybe what they did over the weekend. That might be a way to get into that sort of conversation. Another thing you can do is volunteer for events or help out. And when it comes to volunteering in particular, especially if it's a cause you enjoy, you are more likely to meet like-minded people because they are doing that particular cause as well. They are focused on that particular cause as well. And when it comes to volunteering, something that's worth remembering that's a little bit of a psychological boost is when we see somebody do a good deed, it boosts our oxytocin, it makes us feel good. When we do that good deed itself, not only does the oxytocin pop up, but also we get a hit of dopamine because we've achieved doing something. So getting involved is a really great way to connect. Make plans in advance as well. That's a really nice thing. Have things booked in your calendar. If, for example, you haven't seen your family because they live abroad, maybe make that plan to go and see them. And then it's something you can look forward to. So they're just a few ideas of counteracting loneliness or beginning to find ways of reaching out to other people whilst you're still processing any of the emotional issues that you might still need to reflect on. Give any of those a go, see how it goes. Maybe you can share some of the things that you've done yourself in the comments and join us next time on Business Boost. So we've come to the final part of today's show. It's been a real privilege to introduce so many incredible speakers, and hopefully you've been able to get a lot of nuggets of information and wisdom from them. As I said, and I've said this all the way through the show, but it's really important, there are signposts in the comments if you want that extra bit of support, so please, please do look at the links there. Every single person, the key theme that has come through what everyone has said has been connectivity and reaching out. And something that I've recognised on this show before, and I've said it before, is we don't always know if somebody's behaviour has changed if we don't already know what their behaviour is like. So even before we get to the reaching out and asking, are you okay? Take a moment this week to really observe the people around you. Really think about what their behaviours are. Really take time to notice them. And from that point, you'll be able to ask, is everything okay? Have a healthy week.